This lecture will examine the integumentary system of the human body. This lecture segment, part 1 of 2, will examine the topics of the epidermis, skin color, how sunlight can affect the skin, the dermis, and the hypodermis. The integumentary system is composed of the cutaneous membrane, or skin, as well as the accessory structures. The cutaneous membrane consists of the epidermis, the superficial layer, and the dermis, the deep layer. Accessory structures of the integument include hair, nails, and some exocrine glands. The hypodermis, or subcutaneous layer, is composed of loose connective tissue. It is important to understand that the hypodermis is not considered part of the integumentary system. However, because it supports the cutaneous membrane, it will be discussed. This illustration shows the structures of the integument system. Let's take a closer look. Here we see the cutaneous membrane. The cutaneous membrane is composed of the epidermis, seen here, as well as the dermis, which can be subdivided into the papillary layer, here, and the reticular layer, found here. Deep to the dermis we find the hypodermis. Again, the hypodermis is not actually a structure of the integumentary system. However, it does support the cutaneous membrane. Over here on the right, we see a list of different accessory structures that are found in the integumentary system. A hair follicle, seen here, is where we're going to have the production of hair. We can see a shaft of hair extending above the surface of the skin. There are several different types of glands that are found in the cutaneous membrane. We can see a sweat gland here with its duct that runs to the surface, and scattered throughout are pores from various sweat glands that release the secretion of sweat onto the surface of the skin. We also can see a sebaceous or oil gland here, and this bundle of smooth muscle fibers here is known as the erector pili muscle. We will be taking a closer look at this later. In addition to glands and the muscle, we have things called receptors scattered throughout the cutaneous membrane. Here we see a touch receptor and a pressure receptor. We also can see nerve fibers that travel throughout the cutaneous membrane. It also is important to note the cutaneous plexus, which is located down here in that hypodermis region, again, not actually part of the integument system. This network of blood vessels helps supply the dermis with blood. The integument has 5 general functions. It provides protection by covering internal structures from impacts, chemicals, and infection, and also prevents body fluid loss. The integument helps with temperature maintenance by providing a place for heat exchange to occur with the external surroundings. The integument contributes to the synthesis and storage of nutrients such as vitamin D and the storage of lipids. The integument also plays a role in sensory reception. It contains sensors for pain, pressure, touch, and temperature, some of which we saw in the previous diagram. The integument also excretes salts, water, and wastes, and specialized glands such as found in the breast can secrete milk. Let's take a closer look at the epidermis, the superficial layer of the cutaneous membrane. The epidermis is composed of stratified squamous epithelium, and the thick skin has 5 distinct strata or layers. In thick skin, the deepest layer is known as the stratum basale, also known as the stratum germinativa. This is where the division of stem cells occurs, resulting in the formation of daughter cells that will replace lost or damaged cells of the epithelium. These daughter cells take between 7 and 10 days to travel to the superficial layer of the epidermis. Melanocytes, the cells that produce melanin, are also found here. Melanin is a pigment that contributes to skin color. The intermediate strata consists of 3 layers that are superficial to the stratum basale. The stratum spinosum consists of mitotic daughter cells from the divisions of the stratum basale. The stratum granulosum consists of cells that make keratin, a durable waterproof protein. And the stratum lucidum consists of a layer of densely packed keratin-filled cells. The stratum corneum is the layer of skin exposed to the external environment and consists of 15 to 30 layers of dead keratinized cells. These cells are also known as cornified cells. So taking a look at this diagram here, we can see the basement membrane that sits between the epidermis and the dermis. Above the basement membrane, we're going to have the layer of cells known as that stratum basale. This projection that we see going into the dermal layer is known as an epidermal ridge. The purpose of these epidermal ridges is to increase the amount of surface area between the dermis and the epidermis. This is important because the epidermis is avascular. It doesn't have a blood supply, and it must rely on diffusion with the dermal layer in order to receive its nutrients. The dermal projection that goes between epidermal ridges, seen here, is known as a dermal papilla. Let's talk a little bit about the color of skin. The color of skin is determined by 2 pigments of the skin, known as keratin and melanin. Keratin is an orange-yellow pigment, and it can be converted to vitamin A. It accumulates in epidermal cells, and in fact, diets high in keratin can cause individuals with lighter skin color to actually look orange. Melanin is a brown, yellow-brown, or black pigment and is produced by melanocytes. Melanin can absorb ultraviolet radiation, and this helps reduce the chance of damage to the skin. The flushed appearance the skin sometimes takes on results from dermal blood vessels dilating and rerouting blood to the skin surface. On the opposite side of things, when vasoconstriction occurs, the skin can take on a pale tone, and when blood oxygen level is low, cyanosis or a bluish coloration can occur. This diagram highlights a melanocyte found in the tissue. The illustration below shows the different features of the melanocyte. It is important to understand that different skin colors results from the amount of melanin produced, not by the number of melanocytes present. When we talk about sunlight and skin, too much sunlight can cause damage to the skin. However, some exposure to sunlight is necessary for the synthesis of vitamin D. Vitamin D forms when a cholesterol-related steroid found in the stratum spinosum and the stratum basale is exposed to ultraviolet radiation. The liver fine-tunes the product of this reaction, and from here it ends up at the kidneys where it is converted to calcitriol, a hormone that encourages the absorption of calcium by the gastrointestinal tract. Too much exposure to sunlight can increase the risk of skin cancers. There are several types of skin cancer. Basal cell carcinoma originates in the stratum basale and is the most common type. Squamous cell carcinoma is found in more superficial layers. Both basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma rarely metastasize or spread. Malignant melanoma, however, can metastasize through the lymphatic system, and the survival rate from this cancer depends on the time of detection and the treatments that a patient undergoes. The pictures in this figure shows the difference between basal cell carcinoma, seen on the left, and melanoma, seen on the right. Let's move on to the dermis, the deep layer of the cutaneous membrane. The dermis lies deep to the epidermis and superficial to the hypodermis. It is composed of two layers, as we saw in our initial diagram, the papillary layer and the reticular layer. The papillary layer is composed of areolar tissue that provides support and also contains nerves and capillaries that supply nutrients for the nourishment of the epidermis. Again, this is where we saw the dermal papillae. The reticular layer is composed of a meshwork of elastin and collagen fibers that provide both stability and flexibility to the structure. Parts of accessory organs, including hair follicles and sweat glands, are also found in the dermis. Again, here we see where the dermis separates the epidermis from the hypodermis. So again, we're talking about the dermis. And we can see again all the various structures that are found throughout this area. Can you see the dermal capillaries? The hypodermis, sometimes referred to as the subcutaneous layer, lies deep to the dermis and is not actually part of the integument. However, it helps stabilize the cutaneous membrane. It is composed of areolar tissue and contains many adipose or fat cells. It is the starting point of the cutaneous plexus, that network of blood vessels that extends into the dermis. Let's review with a checkpoint. Can you identify the 5 layers of the epidermis? Please feel free to take a moment to pause the lecture while you come up with your response. From superficial to deep, they are the stratum corneum, the stratum lucidum, the stratum granulosum, the stratum spinosum, and the stratum basale. What are the 2 pigments found in the epidermis? Keratin and melanin.